Hello guys, I'm Super Ron, welcome back to the channel, and we're here again at Auto Shack with my daddy cool Zafira GSI. In the previous episode of the Zafira, we did just about manage to get it up and running, but we did find a lot of carnage inside. We put the camera down the cylinder number 2 and did find a lot of damage. The top of the piston was all missing its corners, all the side of the bores were peppered, and the spark plugs were missing their end, so it has had a lot of damage inside it. But we are just about up and running with very low compression on the middle 2 cylinders, but the outside 2 are good enough to keep it running and driving about. So no more pushing. The general consensus was the damage was caused by the engine running lean. And what this means is there's usually a sprinkle of air going in and a sprinkle of fuel, and this perfect mixture makes the combustion inside. But if there's a problem getting one of these, if there's too much fuel, it runs rich. If there's not enough fuel and too much air, it runs lean, which is what has happened here. So while it's up and running, it's going to be a lot easier to diagnose what this problem with the fuel delivery has been. Because when I replace the engine or rebuild the engine, when I put it back in, it's still going to be the same rest of the car. So if there is a problem with the pump or the injectors or something like that, I don't want to put that into the new engine. So something that I was thinking about a lot was that fuel filter that was installed backwards by one of the previous owners. So I got it back out of the bin and blew through it, and sure enough, there was a load of sludge and everything that came out. So what I'm going to do now is cut that open and see if we can see what the problem inside there was. So this is what it looks like inside the filter. I've already chopped this one in half, but this is pretty much like all oil filters, air filters, any type of filter. It's got these lovely big pleats on the outside that catch all the debris or contaminants or sludge or whatever they need to, and it goes through this way, and then the clean fuel or whatever comes through this way, out the end to the front of the car. So there's lots of surface area here to catch anything that it needs to. But remember, this one was put in backwards. So the dirty fuel from the tank was coming through this way and then coming out the outside. So as you can see, there's hardly any surface area in here. These are all bunched together. So any sludge or anything that came from the tank or dust would go in the middle, and it's no wonder that this blocked up really quickly. So this could even still have been in its service schedule, not neglected, but because they'd put the fuel filter in backwards, this side here was all sludged up, whereas usually, even if one of these pleats get sludged up or whatever, there's all these other ones where it can still flow through. So the big problem is with surface area, because it may not look much different to the circle on the inside to the circle on the outside, but if we look at how much actual size there is when this is closed up, so we've got about that much surface area on the inside, so we can pull that out. So what they were filtering through was about this much surface area, whereas as standard it's this much. So it may have been still in its service schedule, but because we were so scrunched up and it had nowhere to go, I think this is where the problem has been. It was so tight in the middle that blocked up in no time at all, and that's where our problem started. So I think what we're going to do is we've put a clean fuel filter on there, but I don't know how much sludge has got through this because it's being pushed by the pump to get through here, so some might have made its way through. I haven't found any rips or tears, but it only takes the smallest molecules to get through and start blocking up the injectors. So as you can see, this side should be dirty side, but it is in fact dirty on the inside. So that could have been a very costly mistake. So I think we can now agree that the problem with the fuel delivery was this blocked fuel filter, due to it being put in backwards and it blocked a lot sooner than it should have done. But now I want to check that the other components on the car are still okay even after this has been changed, because the pump could have overloaded itself trying to push through a blocked filter, or the pump could have pushed some of the sludge through the filter itself and got up to the fuel rail in injectors. So I think first thing I'm going to do, as we're here and we've got the tools to do so, I'm going to check the fuel pressure and see if the pump is still delivering what it should deliver. Conveniently, on these Z20lets, they do have a little takeoff port to test fuel pressure. So we've just got to take this crossover pipe off again, and then we can plug the gauge in and see what it's running at. And there is the little valve to connect our gauge to. And then I will just slip the crossover pipe back on so it runs a bit nicer. And let's see what the gauge says. So what I'm going to do, as we're not running great at the moment, I'm just going to bridge the fuel pump relay just to see if the pump can maintain rail pressure. Even though it's under no load, that should give us a bit of an indication whether it is flowing fine. These Z20lets should be 3.3 bar, so that should be about 47 PSI. So just about there. So if we bridge the relay, that should continuously run the pump. That is pretty perfect. Bang on, 47 PSI. So I think next up, I'm going to whip the injectors out and just double check how good they are. To release the pressure so it doesn't spray everywhere when you take the fitting off, it's got this little release tube, and when you press the button, the fuel comes out. And this is what has come out. So that is the state of the fuel that's in there, which is probably adding to why it's not running very nice at the moment. And there's the injectors all out. Nothing looks too bad on them, but you can't really tell from the outside. But we are lucky enough here to have an injector tester and cleaner, so we're going to stick these in the machine. And while we're cleaning the injectors, I'm going to drain out all that old nasty fuel. So I've got all the injectors in the machine. I've kept them in order. So this is 1, 2, 3 and 4, just as they were on the car. So now I'm just going to do the first idling test just to see how well they're matched. So straight at the engine, they're not too far off at all. They are all pretty close. Sometimes if you find one that's very much lower, you know you've got a blocked injector. But these are pretty close, considering they've not been cleaned, they've just come straight out of the car as they are. That's not bad. So I think I will do one more test just to double check at a high speed, just to check they're flowing fine, but the spray pattern looks fine, the levels are all good, so I don't think we've got anything to worry about. So that's a high speed run. So I've got cylinder 1 at about 134, cylinder 2 at 128, cylinder 3, 134, cylinder 4, 132. So they're a little bit out. Number 2 is slightly down, so I think they could do with a clean. But overall, there's no dramatic problems. There's no completely blocked injector. It seems to all be okay. Another thing we can do is a reverse flow test. So the injectors are upside down now, so that will pump it through the other day. So if there is anything sitting in top of the injector, that will blast that through. So this is the testing side of the machine, but also in the back is the ultrasonic cleaner. So I think just for peace of mind, I'm going to put them all in there and give them a clean out. Now they're nice and clean, put them back in the front again. Keeping them in order. And give them another test. And we're still pretty much the same as we were before the cleaning. Number 2 is slightly lower, but I think that's not too bad. So that's the injectors all tested and cleaned. I don't think there's really anything wrong with them. There's about a 2mm difference between the sets. So it's not that bad. We can all go back together. And then fill it back up. For a comparison, here's the fuel that came out and here's the fuel that went in. So you can see that's been in there a little while. I've just taken the spark plugs out just to give them a double check, and number 1 hasn't been firing at all. So it's a bit rough when I've been driving it around, but it turns out there's been no combustion in cylinder 1. So let's check if it's got a spark. Number 1. No spark. Number 2. Spark. Number 3. Got spark. Number 4, got spark. I reckon what's happened with number 1, where it's had its end knocked off previously, that shorted out and killed the coil, because on cylinder 1, no spark. I know who I can call. Hello Nevlock, I need some more parts. So I spoke to Jordan at Nevlock Performance and he got me a genuine Bosch coil pack on its way. I phoned up at about lunchtime and it was with me the next day. So this will solve our problem of number 1 coil not sparking, so let's get it in. So coil packs all on, jump packs back on. Let's give it a test. Let the fuel pump prime up and let's go for it. And that is much better. So still a little bit unhappy, but we are running really well now. Considering cylinders 2 and 3 are such low compression and cylinder 2 is missing all the top of its crown of its piston, I think we are running very well, all things considered. Let's see if we've got this misfire gone. And the engine management light has gone off as well. I think we are finished. Shall we call this project done? Well, I am super happy with that. Considering how messed up this engine is inside, it is running fantastically. The misfire has now gone completely and it's just a little bit lumpy on idle, but that's to be expected because we've seen what is inside it. There's a lot of crankcase pressure there because of the worn piston rings in cylinders 2. When you take the oil cap off, it nearly fires off. So with that in mind, this is running absolutely epic. I could even probably take it for a drive now if I wanted to. Now, it might seem a bit strange to some people doing all this work on an engine that I know is faulty, but it's so much easier to sort all these problems now while the engine is running than when it's all out and all the components are all over the floor and you're not really sure what's good and what's not. So now we know all the other components on the car are all running and driving fine. So when we put our new engine in, we're going to be set and ready to go. Because the last thing we want to do is put a brand new engine in, have a blocked injector or something like that, and it runs lean again, melts it, and we're back to square one. And that's not something that I want to do. But I think we have established a timeline on what actually happened. So first thing, someone put the fuel filter in backwards, which blocked up a lot sooner than its service schedule should indicate, which then strangled the fuel delivery, which made the cylinders run lean, and that melted a spark plug and made a mess all in the bore with bits of spark plug flying around. And the leanness could have also taken the top off the piston, or that could have just been from the spark plug firing around in there. And the coil pack situation could also be when the spark plug melted, it shorted out the coil and destroyed number 1 coil. So it all came down to someone putting the fuel filter in backwards caused this whole problem. So it's a very expensive mistake for the previous owner. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. As you can see, in the future, we will be fully rebuilding this car and going over the whole rest of the body, getting it up into mint condition, which is my ultimate plan, to have this as a completely standard running perfect car as if it had just come out of the showroom in 2003. I know we keep jumping between projects from the kit car and back to this one, and we shouldn't be touching this one until the kit car is done. But that fuel filter kept trying on my mind, and I'm glad I've now got all this sorted out. Thanks again to AutoShack for letting me check all the injectors and do all the other bits and pieces, because without that equipment, I wouldn't be able to do half the things that I have done today.
If you can't find the right tool in this garage, Mr. Arizona, you don't belong near a car.
If you've liked what you've seen, make sure you subscribe, because we are going to be tearing this engine out in the future when the kit car is done. So you probably won't see any Zafira episodes for a little while. Well, maybe. But we'll be cracking on with the kit car again, get that done, and then make this project in full swing. So I'm going to carry on sitting in it, playing with all the toys. But until next time, make sure you have fun.